My name is Gayle Grotegut. I'm from the third ward, and I'm old, so I have collected a lot of stuff over the years. Let's go over real quickly this estimated food storage needs for 1 year for an adult. The church has recommended 4 years. We've had prophets of the restoration from the beginning have been telling us to be prepared and have food stored so that we can deal with whatever comes up in our lives. They recommend 400 pounds of grains. That could be wheat, rice, oatmeal, whatever, pasta. Sugar, which could include white sugar, brown sugar, jellies, all that kind of stuff. Salt, 5 pounds of iodized salt. And you would want to also store plain salt without iodine if you're doing canning or fermenting, anything where you're dealing with bacteria that you do not want to kill, because you will kill the bacteria in yogurt or sauerkraut, something you're fermenting. So you want to have some plain salt as well. Also, fat or oil, 20 pounds. That includes mayonnaise, peanut butter, almond butter, powdered butter, vegetable oil, coconut oil. Coconut oil is the oil that stores the best. However, it's really not that good for you, though the marketing about it has been intense the last few years. It is a saturated fat and will cause the same problems that other saturated fats will cause. But it does store well, it does not go rancid. I have also found that the real problem with oil is air getting to it, which causes the rancidity, the oxidation. So you can buy things in a larger container, put it in small containers up to the head, so no air gets in, and it will store for quite a while. I have oil that's 15 years old that's just fine. If it's rancid, you will know it. Dried legumes, 60 pounds. One of the things you might want to invest in is some amino, which is alpha-galactase enzyme. You can get it a lot cheaper if you go online and look up alpha-galactase. If you're not eating beans now, everybody's going to have a hard time. So your body will naturally start building the enzymes as you start eating it. So if you haven't been eating beans, start eating a little bit and gradually add more into your diet. Just for your information, dried beans will expand 2 to 3 times their size when you cook them. On my bigger document, I do have instructions on how to make hard old beans soft. So that will be something you might want if you've been storing things for years. Milk, enough for 3 cups per day per person. And I suggest you also buy lactate tablets, because we have lots of people who cannot handle lactose in milk. Many of them can handle yogurt because the bacteria in the yogurt eats the lactose. That's what it lives off of. So a lot of it's sort of pre-digested. So many people who can't handle milk or cream or ice cream can handle yogurt. The church recommends that you get some non-fat dry powdered milk, and the church's powdered milk is totally different from the stuff we had years ago. I have 5-gallon buckets of powdered milk that I would like to feed to the chickens. But the new powdered milk that the church has, I hate milk, period. I used to gag drinking milk. Hold my nose because they made me drink it. But I can drink this church's powdered milk, which is unbelievable. You might also want to get some evaporated milk. You can also store whole milk, but it won't store as long. BYU found that powdered milk stored with oxygen absorbers in number 10 cans or in Mylar, or using dry ice in $5 buckets lasts 15 to 20 years. They used to tell us it was only good for a year, but they've done a lot of studies to find that most of the food that we've been recommended to store will actually store a very long. If you have children, there's recommendations for how much you store for them. One of the things you would want to have, in addition to those basic things to keep you alive, would be some yeast, baking soda, baking powder, spices, flavorings, things to make food taste better. You can buy dehydrated, freeze-dried powdered eggs. They did say those only last for about a year. Bouillon will make wonders, because I think in an emergency situation, you are not going to be doing gourmet food. You're going to be making soup, one dish meals, casseroles that you could do in a one dish, maybe a sauce to put over rice or mashed potatoes. And I make a ton of soup, so I have ham bouillon, chicken bouillon, beef bouillon, and all kinds of seasonings for things. About the butter, if you use this, I do have some. This is clarified butter or ghee. This has, you boil it for quite a while. I have instructions on this other document. There have been instructions on the internet that just basically say you melt it down for a few minutes or whatever and can it. Do not do that. It has to separate into 3 layers. The bottom layer is the milk solid, middle layer is the oil, which is what this is, and the top layer is foam. If it doesn't separate and you can it, it will spoil. The milk solids spoil in the butter. So you want to be sure if you're going to can butter, then that butter was canned 14 years ago, and it's just fine. I have opened some up, and it's just fine. But you got to be sure that you've done it the right way. You need fruits and vegetables, store a variety. You could have canned food, dehydrated food, frozen food in your freezer. You should be aware that canned tomatoes, pineapple, fruit cocktail, those things will eat away at cans over time, and so you can't store them for very long. What you can do with tomato sauce that you stored for a while, if you think it's getting to a point where you need to do something with it, but you're not going to cook with it right now, you can dehydrate it and then powder it in your blender. Mix it with water later on. So you don't have to throw those things away. You can find another way to keep them. As I said, BYU did a study that showed most canned food lasts for quite a long time, 25, 30 years. So when you see the Best Buy on the bottom of the can, the reason that it's there is that the producers have to keep a warehouse with samples of everything they run. They don't want to have warehouses everywhere. So after that Best Buy date, they can throw that away and replace it with something new. So that's really for warehouses. It's really not an indication that the food goes bad. Canned meats are a good idea. If you're going to make soups or things, you can just throw some of that in. If you're storing meat, then you can reduce the amount of beans, but kind of work with those together. I think it's very important to have some instant main dishes. When you're in a crisis, it will be at least 2 weeks before your brain starts to work. and you can handle anything going on. You're just in crisis mode. So you want to have some things that you don't have to really think about. I learned this years ago, because I've been storing food for a long time, and years ago my bishop asked a few of us to live on our food storage for 2 weeks or something like that. I thought, oh, that's how we live. That's how I cook. But oddly enough, I had 2 grandkids that I was babysitting. Both of them have autism. One wanted to be outside all day long, and he was little. They were, maybe 4 or 5 or something. The other one wanted to be inside all the time. So I'm running back and forth, trying to make sure that they're safe and not getting hurt. And I couldn't do the things I know how to do. Bake bread, I cook, I could do all kinds of things, but I couldn't do it then. And that really hit me that I had to have more instant food. I bought a lot of freeze-dried meals and things, which unfortunately, ever since COVID, with the supply chain problems, a lot of those companies are not making like number 10 cans of main dishes anymore because they can't get all the supplies that they used to get. You know somebody with a freeze dryer, make friends fast and just make some of the things that you make. There are ways to store food long term, and we'll talk more about that. I did make some sprouts here. One of the problems with dehydrated food and canned food and things is that the enzymes die when you can them. The nutrients decrease when you dry them. So we really need some fresh food. And so these are just a few sprouts. These are pea sprouts. These are pea microgreens. I just kept them growing. I cut these off, and there's some in this bowl. You need to try them and compare microgreens to sprouts. Sprouts are a little bit bitter. They're a much more intense flavor. But the microgreens are kind of like a lettuce or something. This is a three-part salad mix. It's got broccoli, radish, and alfalfa in it. This is alfalfa, which is what you would see at the store generally if you're looking at sprouts, or you'd see green bean sprouts. At the end of this document, I've listed some of the places where you can get. I was amazed when I moved to Utah. I went to Macy's one day and went, oh my God, you can buy wheat at a grocery store? So we're very fortunate that we live where we can get things. And we have our home storage center right here in Springville, which is wonderful. Be aware that their prices went up January 1st. And then some other things you need to think about. You have no electricity or water or heat. Classes I took a few years ago, the guy who was teaching them talked about parachutes. That all of these things are parachutes. You know, if you have to jump out of a plane, you want a good parachute, you want it to open, you want it to work. You want to be sure that the person who packed it for you was somebody you could rely on, because your life depends on it. So be sure you have clothes, cold weather, hot weather, water stored. And I listed a few other things that you would want if you've got little children, baby food, and diapers. A few years ago, I went out and bought a ton of cloth diapers, which kids today don't even know what you do with them, I'm sure. But the day might come that their disposable ones won't be there. So a lot of the other kinds of supplies you would need. People have asked me what my favorite food storage cookbooks are, so I have a few of those over here. If I could only have one, this would be it. Emergency Food in a Nutshell. These are all old books because I've been doing this for a long time. There aren't a lot of new ones out. But I looked online and pretty much every one of these, this one is a newer book about thermal cooking. And I have a couple thermal things over here to show you, but this one is a newer book, but most of them are old. If you go to a used bookstore site online or down to Pioneer Book on Center Street, you can find those pretty cheap. A lot cheaper than if you were buying something new. Anyway, let me start over here. Water is critical, and it is something that you really need to pay attention to. You need to store some water indoors. If there was an emergency that you couldn't go outside for a period of time, you need to have some water inside your house. So, you know, we have these 5-gallon containers. They're the big blue containers that cost an arm and a leg now. But you could run out of water, and if water was not available, some of you tried filtering water today. This is a gravitational water filter. It's a small one. I have a couple of bigger ones. My big ones that have 3 cartridges in them will filter 3 gallons of water an hour. Not very much water. So taking care of water is going to be a major operation. And it's not something real easy to do. I think everybody should have a gravitational one because you don't have to do anything to it. You just put the water in and it does it. This is the do-it-yourself one. I don't know if you can all see this. These buckets would have holes drilled in the bottom. And this one, you would pour water into first. It would have rocks. And cut the lids so that water can go through from the little hole. So you have rocks, gravel, sand, maybe coarse sand, and then fine sand, maybe another, an activated charcoal, and then finally your clean water. That's something anybody could do, but you can see why you wouldn't want anything bigger than that size of a container, or you need a bigger house. I store water, under the sink and places like that. Juice bottles are excellent, and the water stays really good in those. Any container that says PETE underneath is something you could store water. Do not store water in a milk bottle. It will leak. This is a PETE bottle, but you can see that after a while, the water evaporates a little bit out of the teeny tiny pores and it gets misshapen. So I would recommend, if you have someone who drinks juice, I would say the juice bottles, they don't change shape. Okay, if you are going to filter water, it is a major process. First, you'd put the dirty water in a container like this. You just let the dirt and grit and stuff fall to the bottom. You have a little spout here. I think this one should actually be a little bit higher so that the dirt's underneath. And then you take that cleaner water, you put it in another bucket, like right here, and either use a sheet or a towel or something from a higher area to a lower one, because this will collect a whole bunch of dirt and grit in it. So then you're going to have cleaner water at that point. Then you want to disinfect the water, and you can use chlorine like pool shock, or this is This is calcium hypochlorite, which is an extremely concentrated compound. It's what they make Clorox out of. But with this, you would just use 1 teaspoon in 1 gallon of water to make a very concentrated solution. And then with that solution, you would put about 3 tablespoons in a gallon of water to purify the water. So this is really dangerous, but it's very effective. This is called Polar Pure. It's an iodine disinfectant. And if you can get it, it's kind of nice because it has a little diagram on the side that you pour some water in and it will tell you at the temperature it's at how much it needs. So because the temperature of the water will affect how it disinfects as well. This is another do-it-yourself water filter. And it's basically like this little stainless steel one. It has a carbon filter in it. It's the carbon filter that cleans the water. So it doesn't really matter if you've got a bucket or you have paid a lot of money for a stainless steel operation like that. So the water, after it's been disinfected, then you would put it through one of these water filters, and it will take some of the chemicals out as well. So then you would have clean water. But these gravitational water filters can cost $300, $500. They're expensive, and they keep going up. So this is a great way. You know, you can order the cartridges themselves, the filters. You want one that's a carbon filter that has silver inside of it, impregnated in it, because molds could grow inside the filters. One thing you need to know about carbon filters is that if they freeze, they're worthless. So if I have known people who've had wonderful equipment and gone on camping trips to try everything out, and they put dirty water in the filter machine here, and it ruins the carbon filter. It's too much for it, which is why you have to go through all this other rigmarole before you put water in your water filter. A lot of people don't know you gotta do that. And so you spend a lot of money, and this is your life depends on it, you want it to work. This is a handheld water filter. You'd want something like that in an evacuation kit. Okay, over here we have a whole bunch of different kinds of stoves. If you're going to cook, you have to have something to cook with. I have a camp stove, and this is a little camp stove oven that just sits on top. And it will hold a 6-piece muffin tin or something. You do small things on that. This is a butane stove that the butane cartridge goes here, and you just turn it on, and it works like a stove. I love those because they work well. I have a couple of little cube stoves that go in an evacuation kit. You can get these little tablets that light up. This one can go with something on top this way, or it can be upside down for something smaller. And it has a fuel starter. I made this years ago. This is a 7-Up can that has holes punched in it. This is an alcohol stove. You just pour a little bit of alcohol in there. And you could use that with one of these little kinds of stoves. Or you could punch holes in the side of a number 10 can, put a number 10 can over it, and use that for a cooking surface. I have a Dutch oven over here. These are box ovens. Little cardboard boxes that are covered with foil. The foil has to be covered on the inside. This does work even though it doesn't have foil on the outside. But you put charcoal in the can, or in a pie pan at the bottom, and you can bake in these. These are each, oh my gosh, I don't know. This one is 40 years old, because I was a Girl Scout leader back in the dark ages, and it works great. We baked cakes, muffins, bread, all kinds of things. This one is an apple box oven, and you lift it off, and you can put, this one has rocks in the cans to hold the cans in place. And charcoal would go in this little tin pie pan. It has a little window to look at. And you put a rock under it. Because either way, you have to have some air come in. You use charcoal for these. I really like them because they use less charcoal than a Dutch oven. A Dutch oven, you would use about twice as much charcoal as the size of the Dutch oven. Like this one is an 8-quart one, so it would need 15 to 20 pieces of charcoal. Whereas in one of these, one piece of charcoal equals about 35 degrees. So you use 10 pieces of charcoal for most kinds of things that you would bake. This is a Vesta stove and heater. And it works with chafing dish fuel. Anyway, this pulls out and chafing dish fuel is underneath. It works great as a heater. It does not work great as a stove, even though they swear it does. But you think about it, if you've been to any kind of a banquet where they've had chafing dishes, they're not cooking the food, they're keeping the food warm. So it will work to keep food warm, but it works really great as a heater because it has a little fan in there. The heat in there runs the fan and it'll blow heat out. This is a rocket stove. Rocket stoves are interesting. You can put little teeny twigs. You wouldn't want anything bigger than like the size of a pencil in here. You could use charcoal, you could put leaves, little teeny bits of tinder. And it heats up. It has really great insulation. Flame comes out of here. Now this just happens to be a rocket stove pan that fits on top to conserve the heat. But there are lots of instructions online to show you how to make a rocket stove. There's all kinds of things you could make it out of. I have seen instructions for rocket stoves out of a number 10 can and a 28-ounce can. That's like a baked bean can or something. Maybe even, like a spaghetti sauce can. Those are a little tall. Use 2 of those cans. I brought some extra number 10 cans if anybody wants to go home and make a rocket stove. This is a thermal cooker. When fuel is tight, you only have so much money, you only have so much fuel. These are nice. You could heat it up like on this butane stove. Anything that could have water run works great for soup. I've made hot roasts in it. It's great for cooking grains and beans even. So you heat it up for just a couple minutes. Then you put it back in this thermal area, close it up, and it keeps cooking for up to about 8 or 10 hours. So that's a great way to conserve fuel. In fact, I have this little thermos that I put wheat in last night. pour boiling water over it, and so there's wheat cereal. If you don't have a wheat grinder and don't know what to do with it, that's something you can do. So it cooked overnight. This is an Instafire Ember. This is an oven, and it works really well. This one works on chafing dish fuel, like that does, but it actually works. I'm not going to say solar oven. One time, I don't know, 30 years ago, I was a single mom with 6 kids, and every single major appliance in my house died at the same time. And I had no money. So one full summer, I used the solar oven, and it works great. But you do have to move it as the sun moves across the sky. You can bake in it. You can, like boil water and things. You can purify water in here. You can use it as a dehydrator. If you open this just a little bit with like a little rock behind this glass, you can dehydrate stuff in there. When you get a chance, I'd like you to come up and try touching all these different flours. I've made flour with this hand grinder, go through it once, and it's hard. Those little hand grinders, I hope you have teenagers. Anyway, this one I ran it through 3 times. This was done with a little coffee grinder. If you can't afford a leaf grinder, now in my ward we have one in the kitchen, and I don't know if every ward has one in the kitchen, but the third ward does. It will take a little while because it doesn't grind a whole lot at one time, but it's a whole lot better than the hand grinder. That's a little coffee grinder. This was done with a blender, and this was done with my K-Tech grain mill. Now I have a stone grinder grain mill that's really big, and it has a crane, so I can do it by hand if I had to. This is a grain roller to make oatmeal. You can roll wheat, you can roll rice, you can roll oats, and it will make like oatmeal flakes, and it will also make some finer flour. So you could make bread with the finer stuff if you sifted. Anyway, I have white bread, wheat bread, and sourdough. I told you about the clarified butter. I'm not using that because it's labor intensive. So I only use it once in a while. I have butter. This is a dipping sauce. In an emergency, unless you have a cow, you're probably not going to have a whole lot. You may clarify some, but it takes time, and it's a lot of work. Dipping sauce is a great idea. This is just olive oil, and you can put whatever seasonings you like. I did Italian seasoning with some garlic powder and onion powder and salt and pepper. So you may want to try some bread and dip it in there. This is what a sourdough starter should look like. It should be thick enough that a spoon can stand up in it. People who've tried making sourdough get really frustrated. It takes a while. When I first started making sourdough, you could have built houses. It was like bricks. And I've been making bread for years. I go, what am I doing wrong? Well, one of the things I learned is that, you see I have a rubber band on the edge of this? The rubber band is where the sourdough start was when I fed it. And if it will go at least double the height of the rubber band there, it will be ready to make bread. And your bread won't be brick. So sourdough is a substitute for yeast. Now, if you have yeast, you want to keep it in the freezer until you're actually using some. So I have a bunch of the SAF instant yeast. And the yeast is one of the reasons people have problems with gluten. The gluten sensitivity is partly because we are making bread too fast. And so the gluten doesn't have time to break down. But it's also because virtually all of the wheat in America is genetically modified to handle glyphosate, which is Roundup, pesticide, and herbicide being spread all around the wheat or whatever grain will up the pesticide, but it won't destroy the plant. So a lot of people are probably sensitive to the pesticide because we are animals too. Pesticide is supposed to kill animals. So most people who are only gluten sensitive can handle sourdough because the gluten is broken down dramatically because it takes so long. It takes, 12 to 15 hours for the first rise with sourdough. And then you punch it down, put it in your pans, and it takes another 3 hours to rise again. And because it's in a wet solution, that the water is what's breaking down the gluten and the other anti-nutrients. Now, if you're in an emergency situation and you're using one of these other kinds of gizmos to make stuff, you want to be sure your bread is actually fully baked. Bread needs to go to about 190 degrees. If it's got eggs or milk in it, it should go closer to 200 degrees. But I would suggest investing in a little instant thermometer that you can stick in and see if it's at the right temperature, because these things are a little iffy in some ways. These are instant blueberry muffins. My kids always love Jiffy muffins. They like them way better than the real thing. Way better. And I was so excited to discover that Winco sells 25-pound bags of these blueberry muffins. And these are actually, the mix is, I think, 9 years old. And they always say anything that's got oil or anything is going to go rancid. Well, the mix is just fine. What has decreased is the leavening. And so if you have something that's old like that, if I were to make 6 muffins, I would be using 1 cup of the mix, and I'd add 1 teaspoon of baking powder and 1/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda, and they puffed up beautifully. So you don't have to throw things out. And they taste just fine. These are wheat thins. This is from hummus. These are grape nuts. The recipe for grape nuts is very similar to graham crackers. So when I broke them apart, I ended up with some stuff that was too fine to be grape nuts. And so I used that along with some sugar butter for the cheesecakes over here. That's the graham crackers. Grape nuts. Graham crackers work great. These are corn flakes. This is granola. Made some treats. These are no-bake peanut butter, chocolate, oatmeal, cookies, candy, whatever they call them. Rice Krispies. I would suggest that you store cereal. Kids will like and will eat. I have number 10 cans of Frosted Flakes and Captain Crunch back in the days when you could go to the home storage center and can your own stuff. But you can can that kind of stuff, if you want to call it canning, in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers and seal it with an iron or with a sealer. So kids are going to have a hard time going from waffle crunch and honeycomb cereal to cracked wheat cereal. So I think we need some transition stuff. I've been experimenting with powdered milk because, like I said, I hated powdered milk when I was growing up. But new powdered milk at the church is wonderful, and it's the cheapest place to buy it. I looked around at other places. It is the cheapest place to buy it, and it comes in Mylar bags like this. This will reconstitute to 2 gallons of milk. and it is now $6.83, 85 cents. I don't know. It is the cheapest place to get milk. I have yogurt that I've made, and you can use yogurt to start a new batch of yogurt. I have packages that I forgot to bring of yogurt I have in my storage, because you can redo yogurt to make new yogurt. Oh, I don't know, about 8 or 9 times. And then you got to start over again. So here's the regular yogurt. This is slightly drained yogurt. This is Greek yogurt, which has been drained. And I want to show you these. These are wonderful. These are paint strainers. You get them in the hardware store. And they are wonderful for straining. So I use those to strain the yogurt. I tie it up with a string and tie the string to a wooden spoon across a big soup pot and just let it drain into the soup. So I have cottage cheeses. This one's made with rennet. Rennet does coagulate milk well. We have some simple cottage cheese made with either lemon juice or vinegar. And those recipes are all in this other document. This cottage cheese tastes more like what you get at the store than the ones with lemon juice and vinegar. So I tried, but this is made with buttermilk. And you can buy the Seiko cultured buttermilk powder to make buttermilk. And use a little bit of that with milk, and it keeps making buttermilk. So kind of like being able to make yogurt from old yogurt, you can make buttermilk from old buttermilk. And buttermilk, I don't normally use it much, but I'm using it a lot because I'm experimenting with cheese. I am trying to learn how to make cheese out of powdered milk that would be comparable to what you buy at the store. This is cheddar cheese that I've made. Making cheese is labor intensive. It takes most of the day. In fact, I was working on this. What I would suggest is you go to the store and buy some blocks of cheese, but buy some cheese wax, and you can order that online. And dip it in the cheese wax, and it will store for a long time. Doesn't have to be in the refrigerator, just kind of a cooler place is better. Although I know somebody who kept it in the back of her car, summer and winter, and it would melt a little bit in the summer, but it would later on. But someone had told me you could do this with paraffin. Paraffin doesn't work. Beeswax is softer than paraffin. This is some roasted garbanzo beans with some Italian seasoning on it. I have made some Spanish beans and rice. This is funeral potatoes made with shredded potatoes, rehydrated shredded potatoes, cheese powder. I also have some sour cream powder, but you can use yogurt in lieu of sour cream. So this one has just yogurt in it. And I have corn flakes at our store. So I use corn flakes and butter on the top. So you can try some of this. It is important to have lots of different kinds of spices and flavorings to make things taste good. Most countries use all the same food. We all use the same food. What's different is the spices or flavorings we put in them. You know, Italian is oregano and thyme and basil, and Mexican is cumin and garlic, and it's just a few little differences. Indian food has cardamom and cinnamon in it. So if you cook a little bit, you kind of know what spices they use in different kinds of cuisine, and you can make things taste different even though it's the same stuff. I would recommend that you go to a restaurant supply store and buy some flavorings. This is butter flavoring. Makes everything taste better, Especially if you don't really have butter, you could add it to some oil to make other things taste better. This one's some coconut oil. My husband loves coconut cream pie, but he is diabetic. We can't use that heavy-duty stuff, so I figured we use this. It's important to have instant food, like I said. Could be freeze-dried stuff, you just add water. If you're not a cook, you can store things like this. This is some Alfredo broccoli pasta mix that you buy at the store, packages off the shelf. And then you can store things by using one of these jar sealers. And now they've got these little ones, portable, that are about this big. And I ordered one and hoped it would come in time, but it hasn't. But you just stick that in a drawer at home and you could use it for everything. But with these, you don't have the ring on, but you put this little jar sealer on, and this one's for a regular size. And turn it on, it will vacuum seal, it will vacuum out the air, and it will seal. It will do both. I brought this one along to show it doesn't have to be full. This is sealed, vacuum sealed, and you can do this over and over again, which is why I like one of those little ones for leftovers and things too at home. But that opened a world of food for me. I have chocolate chips. We need chocolate. I got a wonderful deal once on mushrooms. Tried those. Nuts. They always say the only way to save nuts, put them in your freezer. Well, my freezer's already full. It doesn't have room for nuts. I have nuts that are 15 years old that taste like I just bought them at the grocery store. As long as you get the air out. These are some string beans. Oh. Dehydrating vegetables is really nice. Go buy frozen vegetables. They're already blanched. They're already, all you have to do is stick them in a dehydrator. And so that's really easy. This is a juicer, which I use to make jelly. I brought this to show you. This is made with agave syrup. My husband's diabetic, so we use agave syrup sometimes because it does not raise blood sugar. However, it is not the same preservative that sugar is. And so the color of this raspberry agave jelly, it's turned brown. It tastes just fine. It tastes exactly the same, but it doesn't look the same. This is a steam canner, and probably most of you are familiar with these water bath canners. I don't use my water bath canner except to gather grapes in the fall now, because it's a big can. What I use is this is a steam canner. It works the same as a water bath canner, but it uses only a little bit of water. It doesn't heat up your whole house. Doesn't take forever, but works in the same way. This is a pressure canner, which is used for low acid foods. So you can can beans, you can can vegetables, you can can meat. Meat is actually really easy to do. And chicken tenders, just throw them in the jar. You don't have to do anything. Put them in the canner. If anybody wants to learn how to do that or would like to borrow any of my equipment, they're welcome to do that. Just give me a call. My phone number is on the end of that document. This is a dehydrator I picked up for $3 at a garage sale 30 years ago. And you can still find them sometimes because when mom and dad die and the kids go, oh, my mom was such a nut. They get rid of this stuff and they take it to DI. You can, for long-term storage, you can freeze-dry things. This is freeze-dried celery because I make lots of salads and things. Dehydrated celery is great in soups and stuff. You don't want it in a salad. I tried jar sealing cocoa. Chocolate is my middle name. Anyway, it worked, but it didn't stay sealed super well. So keeping it in a Mylar bag with oxygen works well. You need oxygen absorbers to suck out the oxygen. They look kind of like this. They make big ones, little ones. They are filled with iron filings. And so they say, do not put them in your microwave because it will set off a fire. I just opened a bag of powdered milk from the church the other day to make something. And I mixed it in my blender, and I had all these little black flakes because I accidentally got the absorber in there. It's ruined it. Anyway, so if you want to seal things in Mylar bags, you probably want smaller ones, but you can use big ones, and you can reuse Mylar bags. You can cut them to the size you want, seal the edges to make them the size that you want. But you can't see what's inside of them, so it's kind of annoying sometimes. So if I'm going to be using it, I will open up a Mylar bag, put some stuff in a jar where I can see what it is. But it's a good long-term solution. I have lots of like stew vegetables and things from number 10 cans, but they are such teeny tiny little pieces. When I make soup or something, it's okay. The soup tastes okay, but I need some mouthfeel. So I started dehydrating some of my own stuff. These are just carrots, but they're big chunks. So when I put it in soup, I have something to chew on. These are lemons that are fermented. They're in a brine. 1 tablespoon of salt per cup of water. So you can preserve lemons, limes, things like that. For up to a year, you can't taste the salt. After about that long, yeah, you can taste the salt in the lemon juice, which would be okay if you're making soup or you're making salad dressing. You can still use it, but for about a year, you won't taste anything. This is sauerkraut. This is called an airlock. This is in a brine, a saltwater brine, and given time, the bacteria turn it into sauerkraut. If you have an airlock, which I thought they had some over at Macy's, in their food storage area the other day. This allows the carbon dioxide to go out without spilling all over. If you don't have an airlock, you would just put a lid on gently. I would put the jar in a bowl to catch anything that bubbles out. I wanted to talk about preserving things in 5-gallon buckets. When you buy these, if you were to like store wheat or rice or something, you want to keep the bugs out. So you would put an inch or two of the food in the bottom, and then put dry ice. You use about 2 ounces of dry ice for one of these 5-gallon buckets. And so you pour a little bit of food in. Dry ice is cold and it's hard on plastic, so you don't want it to touch the plastic. Fill it up, put the lid on. Now I want you to see this lid. They come like this. It is really tricky trying to get those off. Ask me how I know. So I would pull that all the way off. After you get the food in, let it sit for about 15-20 minutes because carbon dioxide is heavier than air. So as the dry ice sublimates, turns into a gas, it's driving the air out. So you want to give it time, about 15-20 minutes, then pound it down with with a mallet or a hammer. If it starts to bulge a little bit, then put your knee on and burp it. And it will go like that. I have things that have been in 5-gallon buckets for years and years and years, and they're just fine. However, in 1992, my house burned down to the ground. And we had to throw out everything that was in my number 10 cans is by far the very best way to keep dry stuff long term. It is. But you can't get everything in number 10 cans. And, oh, they're mighty expensive. So 5-gallon buckets work. Some people put a big Mylar bag inside the bucket as well for extra protection. Anyway, you got any questions? I probably ran out of time.